Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind. It's crucial for the world's salvation.
Hey, everybody. It's May 29th, 2022. My name is D-Vase, and I'm joined by my co-host, Al.
Barely here, I'll tell you. I'm recording from a ranch in Liberty, Idaho, up at the tops of the mountains, D-Vase. This is an awesome place.
Wow, you are really sacrificing. You know, I've heard sacrifices bring forth the blessings of heaven. That seems to be a familiar strain, and I can absolutely assure that you are going to be blessed for recording our 9th episode of the Mormon News Roundup.
Yeah.
Now, in this week's episode, unfortunately, there was a lot of tragedy, and we're in the wake of a terrible school shooting at Uvalde, Texas, and we're going to dissect the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints' positions on gun control and violence. We'll critically examine episode 6 of Hulu's Under the Banner of Heaven series. We're going to ruminate about ex-BYU student Julie Stoffer's return to the MTV Real World New Orleans series. And we're going to do a deep dive into Elder David A. Bednar's revealing National Press Club speech and the question and answer session that followed. Head on over and check us out on MormonNewsRoundup.org. That's with 2 N's, MormonNewsRoundup.org. We'd love to connect with you as a listener. And we're just going to jump into our very first news article. And it was kind of a tough week for the news, wasn't it, Al?
It was a real tragic week. And you'll notice that we're only doing really 4 topics this week because they're kind of big topics. So we just don't have, I mean, we had more articles in the news, but we had to cull them out when we were doing this setup for this recording because it's just, these ones are the most important.
It sure is. And, you know, it seems like everybody in that small Texas town of about 15,000 people has some kind of a connection to those who perished. I mean, it's one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history. You know, I'm a former school teacher myself, spent many years teaching in the public schools. My wife still teaches 4th grade here in a suburb of Washington, D.C., and it's something that's always on our mind. And, you know, our thoughts go out to the family members and during this really, really difficult time.
Yeah.
Now, the church did have a response to the gun shooting specifically, and that was at Elder David A. Bednar of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He gave a presentation at the National Press Club last Thursday with a statement that talked about that mass shooting, the deaths of 19 children and 2 adults in that tragic elementary school. And he said, quote, "Sadly, the news of our day is filled with heartache, including the tragic events and the loss of life most recently in Texas. We mourn with those who mourn and pray for all those impacted by this senseless act of violence. My prayer and my blessing is that we will be guided, comforted, and helped in our important work, and that victims, families, and nations might be granted the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that comes from Jesus Christ." How do you feel about that? That's the church's official response. That's all we've gotten on this. How do you feel about that official response there, Al?
I honestly, I just don't feel like it's enough. I just think that this is something that really deserves a big statement. This was a big tragedy, and I just feel like that statement, it just seems a little mediocre for how significant this tragedy was.
It didn't come out of the newsroom. It wasn't from the first presidency office. It was only kind of a one-off in a press club briefing. So I guess you can say that is the level of significance of it. And I think also what is significant in it is it was no call to action. There was no unifying message that says, you know, our thoughts and our prayers were with them, and let's work together to, I don't know, fill in the blank, to do something.
Yeah, for sure.
It was only thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, as a member, I'm thinking, okay, the Lord's message is that this is horrible, but what do I do with that message? What am I supposed to do to stop this from happening? You know, because I worry honestly every day that my wife is in the public schools and something like this could happen. I even worried, in the back of my head is when I was a former, when I was a teacher, that something like this would happen. So it would just be nice if there was some kind of something going forward that I could sink my teeth into to say, okay, this is what we should be doing about this horrible epidemic.
Yeah, something substantial. I mean, for a church that really wants to be the leaders of the world, I mean, this is the one and only self-proclaimed true church. Give us some leadership. Lead the rest of the world. Tell us what to do, because thoughts and prayers are not protecting and saving these kids nearly as effectively as lobbying for some sort of legislation to protect them, to control gun availability to crazies. Something. Let's do something.
Well, yeah, I know the church does spend a lot of money lobbying, but not in guns. They spend a lot of money lobbying in LGBTQ issues. That's where the church really spends a lot of money.
Certainly, yeah.
And last time I checked, all these LGBTQ issues, I don't, unfortunately, tragically, there are some people who die over those issues, but unfortunately, it's nothing compared to the gun violence epidemic.
Well, no,
talking about, a lot of people.
Yeah, this tragedy happened in a town of 15,000 people. And I guarantee you that there was a lot more children in the town of 15 people than there were members of the LGBTQ community. I don't want to marginalize that minority, but I do want to put this in perspective. I mean, there's not a single family in that town that wasn't affected, that didn't have some sort of skin in this game.
Right. So, I mean, the church has filed amicus briefs for these LGBTQ rights. They've done legislative pushes, but they don't do any leadership really on abortion. They don't do any leadership really on gun control. They've done a little bit on immigration, not a lot, but a little bit on immigration. It's just like, this is one of the most perplexing and most, tragic. It's one of the most tragic aspects of our life in modern day United States.
Yeah.
And as a member, what am I supposed to do about it? That's just what I'm wondering, because I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah,
so what is the church's stance?
Yeah, what is and that's what we need to see. The church had no problem shelling out $25 million during that Prop 8 thing in the early 2000s, but yeah, there's nothing with regards to gun control, and it's laissez-faire as far as the abortion issue is concerned. With immigration, it's like, the golden rule when it comes to immigration, I guess, but nothing when it comes to just thoughts and prayers when it comes to gun violence.
I mean, the church has a lot of deep pockets. They could have lobbyists on Capitol Hill. They could hire a whole squad of lobbyists on Capitol Hill to get the legislation over the finish line. What is the legislation that God would like to have? That's what I'm wondering. It's just God gives us our agency. Well, you wonder, I think back into the scriptures that God, remember Uzzah in 2 Samuel 6, the guy who studied the ark and then got zapped?
Yeah.
God took his agency and just bam, gone. Toast. Adios, buddy. You're gone.
Yeah.
So where was Uzzah's agency?
Yeah, just for touching. Just for touching the ark.
Just for touching the ark. So it's odd that we're so worried about God's agency. Well, let's think about 1 Nephi chapter 17. Remember, Nephi reached out and shocked his brothers.
Yeah.
So could God have zapped this killer, just like he zapped Uzzah? Could he have reached out and shocked him, just like we've seen? God has no problem in the scriptures violating all kinds of people's agency. Remember all those people who were alive before the flood?
Exactly.
Where was their agency?
Yeah,
where is their agency?
Their agency was clambering at the doors of the ark, trying to get in, wasn't it? But God didn't curtail that.
Right. Yeah. So, where was the agency of, the people when Noah brought forth all the pestilences and it killed all of those little children? Remember the firstborn children who were innocent? They had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, Moses.
Where was their agency? I'm sorry. What did I say?
Noah. What we were talking about Noah just before that.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about those little children's agency who had no idea that they were supposed to put the lamb's blood on the door? Where was their agency?
Well, sure. And
I also think about, Go ahead.
Well, sure. Those kids hadn't done anything wrong. They were kids.
Yep. And God just took their agency away from them. Boom. You're dead. You have no agency. Yeah. Think about Nephi in the Book of Mormon who killed Laban. Think about Captain Moroni who went on a lot of killing sprees, and so did Mormon. God has no problem throughout the scriptures of just taking away people's agencies just like that. Boom. Your agency's gone, buddy.
Yeah.
So why is agency now so gosh darn precious that God can't intervene and take out these shooters before it happened?
Well, I'll tell you,
That's what I'm wondering.
Divas, this one is something that it's very near and dear to me because I am a gun owner. I've got a few guns, but I'm also very much in favor of legislation to control who can and cannot have guns. I mean, if the government's going to go as far as telling me that I need to check out my gun and keep it in a like government controlled facility, that's okay with me actually, because I don't ever plan on using my guns to take human life. I don't want my guns to fall into the hands of people who are motivated to do that. So I can't we just do something? I mean, what is this all about? It seems like this is rooted almost in, we're going to talk about this later in the episode about Under the Banner of Heaven, but it seems like it's rooted in kind of the crazies that are in the backwoods, just hoarding their guns and their supplies and their bug out shelters, just waiting for the government to try and march on them and try to take their guns away so that they can fight back. It's weird. I don't see that day coming. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I wonder, see, the church, some people say, well, the church isn't going to get involved with this because it's not a moral issue. It sure seems like a moral issue to me.
How can they say that's not a moral issue? How can anybody say that, the killing of school children and, children who are trapped in, the parents aren't even allowed, the parents were trying to bust out the windows to get to their kids to protect them. And the police were trying to hold them back. The fire department's trying to hold them back, say, oh no, well, we just got to let this play out. Like, I mean, it wasn't handled perfectly. I think people did the best that they could, but I'm very glad that this Border Patrol officer was able to get in there and follow going against protocol because he called for backup. He should have waited for backup, but he went against protocol. He went in there, he took his shot, and he was able to stop this tragedy before even more children were killed.
Yeah, and in Texas, you can buy an assault rifle when you're 18, but you can't buy a handgun until you're 21.
Yeah, it's weird.
How does that make any sense?
Yeah, and which one do you think is going to kill more people? Yeah,
obviously the assault weapon.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing anyway.
Well, you try to look in the scriptures for, okay, what is the scriptures trying to tell us about what we should do with guns? I do have a couple. I do have one or two scriptures. Alma chapter 24, verse 15 and 16. This is from the anti-Nephi Lehi's. And it says, oh, how merciful is our God, and how behold, since it has been as much as we could do to get our stains taken away from us, and our swords are made bright, let us hide them away, that they may be kept bright, as a testimony to our God at the last day. Or at the last day we shall be brought to stand before him to be judged, that we have not stained our swords in the blood of our brethren, since he imparted his word unto us and has made us clean thereby. And now, my brethren, if our brothers seek to destroy us, behold, we will hide away our swords, yea, we will bury them deep in the earth, that they may be kept bright as a testimony that we have never used them at the last day. And if our brethren destroy us, behold, we shall go to our God and be saved. So the anti-Nephi Lehi's, they were extreme pacifists.
Yeah.
So is that what we're supposed to do? Is, there's no guns in the Book of Mormon, but is that what we're supposed to do? Is not have guns and turn the other cheek?
Well, that's what the equivalent would be, wouldn't it? I mean, and this is what they're saying is, and these are people that were killing in a time of war. So, I mean, when we talk about, well, what about when you go to war, you need to be able to take human life because you're fighting against people that are trying to take away the freedoms of your people or trying to kill your people. So you have to defend yourself. These people had been using their swords to defend themselves. And yet, even then, they said, no, we don't want this, the blood to stain our souls. We want we want at the second coming, these swords to be found shiny and unused. And, that's the message of the Book of Mormon. So when it comes to looking to scriptures for guidance, it seems like pacifism is the way to go.
But on the other hand, Al, let's look at the life of Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
He brandished a sword. He used guns. In fact, have you ever been to Carthage? I've been to Carthage jail. Yeah. I've seen the spot where he was killed at. And, this is from fairlatterdaysaints.org. There's overwhelming evidence that from the earliest days to the present, both official and unofficial church publications have repeatedly mentioned that Joseph Smith had a pepperbox pistol that he used to defend himself. And in fact, it's still in the church's church history in Salt Lake, the actual gun that he used to defend himself is still in there.
Oh yeah, it's there.
If the founder of the religion has no problem using a gun to defend himself, the question I have is, what are we supposed to take from these seemingly conflicting accounts in the scriptures? And what are we supposed to do to prevent something like the horrible massacre that happened in Texas from happening again?
So far, we have erred on the side, Dives, of not taking guns away from people, or not allowing the Second Amendment to be impeded at all. And I don't think this has to do with the Second Amendment. I think what this is about is, if we're going to err, I would much rather see the people of the United States, our government, of the people and by the people and for the people, guarantee the life, liberty, and happiness of the people. I mean, our right to life, before it would guarantee our right to bear arms as a regulated militia. So far it seems like we're more erring on the side of, well, we certainly don't want to impede people's right to bear arms regardless. But I mean, do we have to let do we have to let the crazies have guns? That's where I'm coming from.
Well, the church doesn't necessarily technically have an official position in the handbook, because I went and researched it. However, back in 2019, the church released a letter to everyone, and they put it into the handbook about a shift in policy for people coming onto church property.
Yeah.
And it prohibits nearly every parishioner from having a lethal weapon. Doesn't matter if you have a concealed carry permit.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to. This is from the statement. It says the churches are dedicated for worship of God as havens from the cares and concerns of the world, with the exception of current law enforcement officers. The carrying of lethal weapons on church property, concealed or otherwise, is prohibited.
Yeah, and
so the church seems to be anti-gun.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was released after there were a couple of incidents. Maybe not a couple, but there was at least one incident where somebody brought a gun to church, and
it accidentally went off.
Yeah, exactly. So that's when the church said, "Hey, don't bring your guns to church." And that's so far, that's all that they've said, is don't bring your guns to church. They haven't said don't bring them to a school and don't shoot up the children. I mean, this is heartbreaking to me, Dives. I mean, I've never met your wife, but I mean, you say she teaches 4th grade. But for the grace of God, she could have been in that same school, or it could have happened in her same school. Yeah.
Absolutely. But the church also maintains 4 schools, the 3 BYUs and also LDS Business College, renamed to Ensign College. So what is their policy? Because you assume that whatever the policy is at the chapels and at BYU, that must be pretty close to the church's position, right?
Sure, I would think so. Stands to reason.
What you have to imagine stands to reason. So the BYU, and this is from policy.byu.edu, it says the firearms and weapons policy: firearms and other weapons are not permitted, concealed or unconcealed, with or without a concealed weapon permit, on any church-owned property, unless you are a law enforcement officer, BYU police, BYU security, and then there's a couple small exceptions for BYU ROTC members, who shout out to BYU ROTC. I'm a graduate of BYU ROTC. So they're trying to make it so that the campuses and chapels and everything are guns free. And of course, the only problem with that is that the schools in Texas, that school in Texas, that was gun free too.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily stop killings.
Well, and
that's the problem.
Yeah, and I know that they say, well, if you outlaw guns, then only criminals will have guns. Well, criminals have guns now, and we're not doing anything to stop that. At least, can we try something? Anything? Yeah.
I'm just waiting for the church leadership to tell me that they told me what we're supposed to do for LGBTQ. They've got it line-ited down to the iota of exactly what rights, what laws, what bills. Everything is completely lined out for all trans rights, rights in the workplace, rights on. That's all lined out.
Yeah.
Nothing on gun violence. Nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
32%, I looked this up on, this is from News.Gallup Gallup poll. It says that 32% of U.S. adults say they personally own a gun, and 44% of people say they live in a household that has a gun in it. But Ryan Burge, he's famous for doing all of his statistics. He went through and queried a bunch of people and I found this from his Twitter feed. I'm still pulling up here. It says that out of all of the religions, Al, from white evangelical to mainline Christians to Mormons to Catholics to atheists to Orthodox, Black Protestant, non-white Catholic, Buddhist, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, where do you think Latter-day Saints are on the spectrum of owning a gun? Are they more likely to own a gun or less likely?
Honestly, well, let's see. I guess if I'm going to go from my locale in Utah, I would say that they're more likely.
They are. In fact, out of all of the faiths in the United States that are listed, and there's a whole lot of them, like I just said, Latter-day Saints are third highest. They're very much likely to be a gun owner.
Third highest. That's significant.
Yeah, they really are. They're gun-toting folks, you know. And I'm a member of the armed forces myself. You own a gun. We fit the mold here. So I just, if Jesus was at the head of the church, what legislation would he support? That's what I want to know. Would he want universal background checks? Would he want an assault weapons ban? Would he want delayed purchasing for you to have to like a 2-week waiting period? Would he want magazines which are very small? Would he ban these bump stocks? What is the legislation? Certainly, Jesus has an opinion, right? I guess theoretically, Jesus has an opinion about what gun laws should be on the books in the United States and throughout the world. Well, there's got to be a best solution here. So, what is it?
Yeah, certainly, we can look through the New Testament and find out what Jesus' opinion is, just based off of what he says with regards to like rebelling against the government and fighting against oppressive regimes. Say King Herod or the Romans. Jesus did not incite violence. He was very much to submit to your captors, be obedient to your oppressors and turn the other cheek. So he was a pacifist as well. He wasn't advocating for violence. I think that the legislation he'd be pushing for, if nothing else, is that do unto others as you'd have done unto you, and turn the other cheek, and don't fight violence with violence, but fight violence with peace. Fight it with love.
And that's what's you see that in those Book of Mormon passages too. Very complicated issue. For those listeners out there, would you drop us an email? We're at kolob@mormonnewsroundup.org. That's KOLOB at mormonnewsroundup.org, or we're at Twitter at @newsmormon. Let us know your thoughts on this horrible tragedy, and what the church's position should be, or what the church should be doing to show leadership and help prevent these kind of tragedies from happening in the future.
Yeah, and if I'm completely wrong on this, I know I'm very passionate about it, but I welcome your criticism. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong. I would love to hear the emails about that. So.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, this goes directly into our second article, which is on Under the Banner of Heaven, which goes over a brutal murder in the 1980s in a small American Fork community.
Yeah, so now we're on to episode 6 of, let's see, is there 7 or 8 episodes in this one? I think there's 8.
I believe there's 7.
7, okay, 7. So,
is there 8? I thought it was 7.
I can't remember. I think you're right, it's 7 now that you mention it. So this is the second to last episode, and it's a juicy one. Very juicy. So there's some interesting things that happen in this episode of Under the Banner of Heaven. We've got a glimpse into the life of the Lafferty family and how they got radicalized. This one gives a little bit more expose on how Ron Lafferty went from mainstream Mormonism into fundamental Mormonism, into some really weird... he starts messing around with some backwoods people in Oregon, starts messing around with some people that are there. Well, let's see, they keep saying Salem. I'm not sure if it's actually in Salem, but I mean, there's a guy that's kind of this old prophet type guy that's got a long beard that lives in a mine that he's trying to get ready to take over the government and restore the church to the true ways and practices of the old way. And some extremely racist things are said by that guy in this episode. It's a wild ride. So, D-Vaz, did you?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you watched this episode?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to ask you a couple of things. First of all, Ron Lafferty is with all of these fundamentalist dudes, and it shows that he goes into there's a nude hot tub scene in which he's baptized into this fundamentalist sect.
Yeah.
And then he starts making out with the guy who baptized him directly afterwards.
Yeah, and this guy who
how did that how did that scene strike you?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was odd. It was most surprising. They were all about love. Yeah, they were all about love, I guess. There wasn't. Everything was covered, so I mean, anybody that's got eyes that they don't want to see a whole bunch of nudity, you're not going to see anything that's not covered by a bathing suit. Everything's from the top of the chest up. So it's co-ed. They've got men and women in this hot tub together, and Sam Worthington, who plays the role of Ron Lafferty, finds this sect of fundamentalist Mormons who are just practicing the same polygamous religion. And it kind of rings eerily similar to a lot of the ways that Joseph Smith ran things. A little bit just fun loving and having a great time, and but it didn't have any of the sinister side of Joseph Smith. Like you said in our previous mention about the gun violence, Joseph Smith was not opposed to taking a pepperbox pistol and firing into a crowd of people that were trying to kill him. So, I mean, he did not. This is more on the side of the peaceful, loving side of Joseph Smith that just loved polygamy and make love, not war. This was what this new prophet was all about. And he called himself the mighty one. And that's what this episode seems to be all about, is who is the mighty one that's supposed to restore the church to the former way that Joseph Smith had it set up. A lot of references to, Brigham Young was this way, Joseph Smith was that way. And our hero, Jed Pyre, Pyrie, the detective that's trying to work this case, he's really struggling this episode. He goes through a lot of real difficult things because he's seeing that how these people came to be is a very natural and normal way according to the teachings of the mainstream LDS Church. And you see some you see some moments in here that are really significant, and some moments that really are upsetting. One of the moments that I found really upsetting was Alan Lafferty and his wife Brenda, who is supposed to be the hero of the show. They go to get some marital advice from the general authorities. Doesn't specifically say that they're apostles or 70s, but you know that they're in the church office building, and you kind of get the idea that this is probably an apostle partnered with a 70 who are doing the counseling. At least that's how it comes across to me. What do you think, Dives? What did you think of that scene?
Someone above, back in the 80s, it was a little easier to get access to the general authorities.
Yeah,
because the church was, the church was so much smaller, like 2 million members.
Yeah, and it seemed like they did pair an apostle up with the 70 when it came to counseling like this. So that's why I infer that that's probably what's going on.
Yeah, and Jeb Pyrie is questioning his faith during this, and the car. I thought that one of the best scenes in the entire series is when he goes out to the car by himself. He's reading what is apparently something that is disturbing to him about either history or doctrine or something about the church's. Something is bothering him a lot. And his wife comes out and he just says, I feel like I can't do this anymore. That seemed like a pretty authentic scene to me. That seemed like one of the best scenes in the series so far.
I'll tell you, from someone who left the church, this scene rung so close to home. It was so significant. And the reason why, Dives, is because I speaking for myself, speaking for several people that I've talked to who have had similar situations like me, it's a heartbreaking scene. I mean, poor Jed he breaks down. He is sobbing out there in the car. And the book that he's reading, it's a real book. It's called Mormonism. Let's see, Shadow or let's see, the Shadow of Truth.
Mormonism, Shadow or Reality.
Shadow or Reality. That's
by the Tanner.
Yeah, by Sandra and Gerald Tanner. Sandra Tanner's still around.
Yes.
She runs Utah Lighthouse Ministries. The Tanners are kind of the forefront runners of the, should we say, anti-Mormon literature. The reason why they are is because most of the books that expose the history of the church that causes people to leave, it seems like these guys wrote most of the books, at least back in the 70s and 80s and the time.
Yeah, so it is. Yeah, it's accurate that he would have been reading that book.
Yes, it
because
is.
that might have been a very popular book at the time.
Certainly
now,
is.
Elder Bednar at the luncheon, he responded to they gave him a question. He had a question and answer section, and this was his comment about the Under the Banner of Heaven series. And he said, quote, "There's some discussion about how accurate it is, how fictional it is. This is not new. Christ was mischaracterized. We have been mischaracterized since 1830 when the church was reestablished. That has always been the case.
Sure.
I don't think it will ever go away. We don't like it, but we don't spend all of our time trying to respond to it." So that's basically what you're going to get about Under the Banner of Heaven. We don't like it, but we're not going to spend too much time responding to it, which is a typical church response.
Yeah, they'd prefer to sweep it under the rug and ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, they definitely do. So you have anything else on this episode?
No, I was going to say that seems to be a fairly typical response for the church what it does is it causes a lot of damage to people who are actually questioning and looking for help to make it make sense. Because it's just not satisfying for most people to be told, well, just don't think about that. Just ignore it. People want answers. I mean, you and I are very much people that want to find out what the answers are. I mean, if you got a question, it's going to eat away at you until you find the answer. So just to be told, oh, don't worry about that. That's not good enough.
Well, you remember we covered this in an earlier episode. The church did have an official response to the 2003 book, which is still up on newsroom.org.
Yes.
Where they line by line go through and show some of the actually many of the problems of the book, of the wrong history, the wrong fiction, the wrong language. So, I mean, the church, they're not necessarily sweeping it. They've had an official response to the book. I don't think they're going to dignify this series with another official response, since it's basically based off of the book.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So we upload all of these episodes, by the way, to Facebook, and we also upload them to YouTube. So come and check us out. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you think about episode 6 of Under the Banner of Heaven. And that's not the only thing that happened in cinema this week, was it, Al?
No, we had a rather significant story that came up that we've alluded to last week. I don't know that we got. Did we go too specific on this last week? I can't remember. It's been a week.
We have talked about Julie Stoffer in the past,
yes.
So in our previous episodes.
Yes, because we knew that this episode was coming up. Okay, Julie Stoffer, for anybody that doesn't know, back in the year 2000 when I was attending BYU, she made national news for being a BYU student to go on MTV's The Real World. And this is a show that was all about getting a bunch of people from very different walks of life together with very dramatic and strong personalities. And let's just see what happens when the real them comes out and they start tearing each other apart. So that seems to be kind of the way it was, wasn't it? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's a pretty good sum up. So
yeah.
She was a good member. Went to New Orleans. She got kicked out of BYU because she was living with people who she was not married to. She was still a faithful member of the church for many years afterwards, and now they're doing a reunion show to bring all those people back.
Yeah, and so I've watched the pilot episode. I haven't seen the whole series, but let me tell you, there's enough just in the pilot episode and the previews. Including, I think we did an article last week about what was going down with this. Boy, is there drama. Oh, the drama. If you like drama, you ought to watch this. It's dramatic. But we're going to find out a lot of things about her. Let's see. I don't think that she has said yet officially that she's left the church. I think that will come out later on. So far in the first episode, she addresses all the pain and hurt that she caused to her co-stars on this show, because she behaved really poorly towards them, hurt their careers, or tried to hurt their careers at least. She sent some emails that just ran them down, and let's see, that her roommate in the first run of the show, he came out as a gay person somewhere in that process, and she I guess sent an email to this school running him down and saying, well, I'm a better candidate because I don't think you want an openly gay person to be giving a talk to these students, to be a role model for what they should look up to. You don't want them to look up to a gay person, lest it turn them gay for some, that, I don't understand that line of reasoning, but okay, Julie. She has no love to greet her when she comes back. There's a lot of daggers being stared at her. If looks could kill, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I went back and watched one of the episodes of when she was first there, and I mean, the problem is that she was pretty self-righteous.
Yeah,
she was a little bit holier than thou, and that doesn't rub people the right way when you're on these shows.
Never does. Especially just because it seems to me that there can be an attitude, and I noticed this during my years at BYU. It's pretty easy to develop an attitude that because my sins aren't the same as your sins, that my sins are less significant and more forgivable or easy to be tolerated than yours. And that's the attitude that Julie really, really exudes. Is that she's just this, happy-go-lucky BYU girl that's so innocent and sweet, but she'll tell you exactly what you're doing wrong, and she has no problem lying if it suits her. And that bothers a lot of people.
Yeah, she's a real.
Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't make a lot of friends when she was in the first season, and now that she's come back, that streak has continued. And the article that we linked to in the show notes, which was published on May 25th, 2022, it says, Julie Stoffer reveals why she's no longer a Mormon on Real World Homecoming. So this is a real surprise that, she was a real devout person, the typical, very stereotypical Molly Mormon back in the day, and now she's left the church.
Yeah.
And she says in the article that people were shocked. They said, "You're not Mormon anymore?"
Yeah.
And she said, "This is quote, no, we left the Mormon Church in 2008. Some people, they're Mormon, but they only pick some of the things in Mormonism to believe. I'm not going to believe in the racist parts, the misogynist parts, the homophobic parts, and everything else." End quote.
Yeah, I think I've known people that try to compartmentalize the church and take the good with shunning the bad, and like, okay, well, I'll believe in the Book of Mormon, I'll believe in the Doctrine and Covenants, but I'm not going to believe in racism. I'm not going to believe in the anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, but I will believe that the teachings of the Book of Mormon are true, and I'll follow that. So there's people that try to make it work, and I understand that. But she seems like she's decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to throw it all away and walk away from it. So, and there's plenty of people that do that as well. So, she hasn't gotten to it yet in the pilot episode anyway, but that conversation's coming for sure.
It's on episode 3, and when you're on the real world, you're sequestered from your loved ones, and this time they let her husband Spencer come in and visit her, and things got weird, right, Al?
Yeah. So from what I understand, they have sex. Okay, I'm not going to mince any words about that. I guess they're covered by a blanket. But they make no secret about it. There is a very consensual consummation of the marriage that happens on camera. And Julie is
on camera.
It's not that Julie didn't know there was a camera there. I mean, these guys, they know that there's a camera. So her personality is just skeevy is a good word for it, I would say. I would call her skeevy, that she has no problem with a camera rolling on national television, showing her and her husband in coitus.
Right. I mean, she's just she lives a Mormon lifestyle, ridicules everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, dumps on the. This is in the first time she appears.
Yeah.
Mormonism is great. You're wrong. I'm right. I'm living the real life, and you guys need to shape up and behave. She comes back 20 years later. Mormonism is the worst. I'm going to have sex on camera. Then she gets into this crazy fight with her husband, Spencer, over their Spotify account. Then she gets absolutely hammered, drunk, drop dead, spiraling out of control, wasted.
Oh.
I mean, it's just spiraling out of control. It's just...
If you want to see a dumpster fire, Julie Stoffer is your dumpster fire.
Now, the only last thing I want to discuss is that she said to her fellow castmates on this, she said, I'm trying to find the quote here. She said that she was going to hell. I do want to discuss that for a moment.
She says that she is a son of perdition now.
She said the word that she said is that I'm going to outer darkness, which is worse than hell.
Yeah.
It's saved for people like me who are publicly against the faith. So she is saying, I've committed the sin, not a sin, the sin, which is to come out publicly and speak against the church. Therefore, I'm going to outer darkness.
Yeah.
Is that the church's teaching? Is Julie going to hell?
I got to say, Dives, to be fair to the church, they really are. They have not ever been very specific about what the sin against the Holy Ghost is. So what that unpardonable sin entails, there's a lot of people that would say, I mean, I've heard it described as to commit murder against light and knowledge. So basically, I've heard it said, you have to be looking directly at the face of Christ himself and turn away and say there is no God. I've heard it described as you have to have your calling and election made sure and then fall from grace or leave the church. But none of this is official, okay? This is just hearsay. There's no official publishing that shows this is what you have to do in order to commit the unpardonable sin. There's nothing that says this is what that unpardonable sin is. It just the scriptures just say to deny the Holy Ghost. It's very vague. Okay, I mean, and to deny the Holy Ghost. Well, if that can be interpreted as either nobody's committed it or everybody's committed it, and because what does that mean? Yeah,
okay. Well, that's a pretty good summary. Now, from the churchofjesuschrist.org, you search for Sons of Perdition, and you do get somewhat. I mean, it is on the church's website. Okay. I know that's not official doctrine, but it's about as close as we can get. And it says,
it's close.
Under Sons of Perdition, the followers of Satan who will suffer with him in eternity are sons of perdition, and they include two classes of people. Okay. Number one, those who followed Satan and were cast out of heaven for rebellion during premortality. So they never even came to earth.
Yeah, and that
1/3 of the people who were...
Yeah, it's easy to define that because nobody knows any of those people.
Yes, there are the demons who surround us, Aldo. There's been 120 billion people on this earth. So 1/3 of that then would be about 40 billion or so. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
About a third of that would be 60 billion.
60 billion.
Remember, because it's 1/3.
Yeah.
So it'd be 60 billion. There's about 6 billion people on Earth. So it's about a 10-to-1 ratio of demons to regular people here on Earth.
And that's just right now. I mean, so we're talking at least, okay?
That's correct. If Jesus doesn't come for another 1,000 years, that ratio could be much, much higher. But anyway, that's class number one.
Sure.
We're digressing. Number two is those who were permitted to be born into this world with physical bodies, but then served Satan and turned utterly against God. Those in the second group will be resurrected from the dead, but they will go to outer darkness. It doesn't seem like Julie really fits either of those to me.
If she's now serving Satan, she's doing a real poor job. She's not a very good servant. I mean, I would call her a slothful and not a wise servant of Satan. So I think she's a little ambitious. I think that she gives herself a little too much credit. because
Okay,
she doesn't
just-
strike me as being a Satanist. She strikes me as being someone that still wants to be perceived as being a decent, good person, even though she's changed her religion, or maybe even left all religion together. And that's fine. I don't think a lot of atheists really openly consider themselves as serving Satan or actively working towards building a kingdom for Satan.
Okay, well, let's just take a look at two last things about this, because I was really curious about this. She seems to think, where's she getting this idea that she's going to be one of the few people who goes to outer darkness? That is a terrifying thought for someone to go through. So Joseph Smith taught in the King Follett Discourse, he said, quote, all sin shall be forgiven except the sin against the Holy Ghost, for Jesus will save all except the sons of perdition. What must the man do to commit the unpardonable sin?
Okay.
He must receive the Holy Ghost, have the heavens opened unto him, and know God, and then sin against him. After a man has sinned against the Holy Ghost, there is no repentance for him. He has got to say that the sun does not shine while he sees it. He has got to deny Jesus Christ when the heavens have opened unto him, and to deny the plan of salvation with his eyes open to the truth of it.
So this is from the King Follett Discourse in the Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith, which is a book.
Right.
So that's even so. Like I said earlier, it doesn't really clearly define what it is, but at the same time, it also does, and you get the spirit behind it, right? I don't think that Julie Stoffer has that same vibe about her right now. I don't feel like she's out there looking at the sun while it's shining in midday and saying there is no sun.
Yeah. Now, before we were talking about her before the show, and you said you weren't familiar with it. Now, all of these talk about sons of perdition. They don't talk about daughters of perdition.
Yeah.
And you seem to be of the mindset that there is no daughters of perdition; they're only sons. Is that right?
And this is something that I've been taught at BYU in religion classes. So I've heard it said that daughter of perdition is not a scriptural term, and that this is something that the Mormons would, let's see, I've heard Mormons use this as a way of saying, well, God obviously loves women more because he doesn't allow them to become sons of perdition, because there's no such thing as daughters of perdition. And so it's actually a blessing to the female to not have the priesthood power, because that takes away her ability to commit the ultimate sin.
Wow.
Yeah, because
never heard that one before.
Because I mean, the sense that you get is that a son of perdition has to go through all of the priesthood ordinances, and one of those priesthood ordinances is getting ordained with both the Aaronic and the Melchizedek priesthood. So, in order to become a son of perdition, you have to be a priesthood holder.
Okay, that's just what you've been taught. Now, some people also take it a step further and say you can't be a son of perdition unless you've had the second anointing.
That's
until you've been made clean from the blood and sins of this generation, and you've had your calling and election made sure, and that you are on the path. You are good to go.
Yeah.
You can't be a son of perdition unless you've had that and then turned and served Satan directly.
Yeah, and how many people do you think have honestly had their calling and election made sure, have received this second anointing ordinance? I mean, it's a real ordinance. They do it in the temple. I don't think very many.
It's not a lot. It's not a lot. But speaking of you get it from stake presidents on up, and their wives. Don't forget their wives are also second anointed as well.
That's right. And I don't think that Julie Stoffer has had her second anointing.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that she hasn't.
Prove me wrong, Julie. Okay. Call us in.
Now, regarding the daughters of perdition, we're going to finish this up here. Brigham Young said in the Journal of Discourses, Volume 8, page 222, quote, I doubt whether it can be found from the revelations that are given and the facts that exist that there is a female in all the regions of hell, end quote. And he also said in a discourse, women must atone for sins committed by volition of her own choice, but she will never become an angel to the devil and a sin so far as to place herself beyond the reach of mercy, end quote. Okay. I'm starting to realize that I kind of wish that I was a woman here. Joseph F. Smith said that there will be no daughters of perdition, and he said that in the Ministry of Meetings in the Diaries of Rutger Clausen. So quite a few journal authorities say that the only people in outer darkness are sons.
Okay. Yeah, now we've got it documented. Yeah.
However, As in most things in the church, in 1893, Wilford Woodruff spoke to a group of apostles, and he said, "quote There will also be daughters of perdition. There will also be daughters of perdition. There is no doubt in the minds of the brethren," and that's from D. Michael Quinn's The Mormon Hierarchy, Extensions of Power. So, do you want to believe Joseph F. Smith? Do you want to believe Wilford Woodruff? Who are we going to believe? Brigham Young? Who are we supposed to believe on this?
Wilford Woodruff,
or Julie herself?
Wilford Woodruff, who hurt you? I mean, they had such a united front, and then Wilford Woodruff went out there and said, "Oh yeah, there's definitely daughters of perdition." And there's Julie out there saying, "Oh yeah, and I'm one of them because I left the church."
Yeah. Okay. Last thing, miracle of forgiveness. Spencer W. Kimball, he stated, quote, "The sin against the Holy Ghost requires such a knowledge that it is manifestly impossible for the rank and file of the church to commit such a sin." Julie, end quote. Julie seems like a pretty rank and file member. And since he's the last one on this list, I guess we have to put the most amount of stock into Spencer W. Kimball.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of shocked. One of the things that I gained from this, the pilot episode of this show, is that like these are people who want to consider themselves to be celebrities, and I'm sure that they were famous at the time to a select audience, and so maybe they did have people walking up to them on the street, random people. I don't know any of these people. That I can't call them a celebrity. So I mean, their celebrity just doesn't. It doesn't spread very far. Julie was talking about how she and this I can't remember the name of the other kid that was the gay kid. They went to this college and spoke, and they were kind of laughing at the students for not knowing who they were. None of the students at this university had any idea who they were because none of them watched The Real World. And that was their single only claim to fame. So I'm sorry, Julie, but you're rank and file at best.
I mean, Julie did not make the Real World All-Stars. The All-Stars is where they bring all together the most popular people from all the episodes. She's never made any of the All-Star reunions.
Yeah, for sure.
She's a B-list Real World, and I guess that's better because we're like, hey, Al, I hate to break it to you, but we're like C-list podcasters, so she's still got us.
I have a couple of extra clips where I was background in a couple of movies. So, I mean, my celebrity status is a few steps below Julie. I mean, I'm not even a celebrity in my own household. But yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Signature Books, www.signaturebooks.com. We invite you to check out their latest book written by Romney Burke, which is entitled Susie Young Gates, Daughter of Mormonism.
Brigham Young had over 50 wives and 56 children, but none has better name recognition than daughter Susie Young Gates. She lived from 1856 and died in 1933. Yet she, like so many women of Mormonism's past, has remained a mystery to most church members. In Susie Young Gates, Romney Burke, the author, paints a portrait of a strong woman who rose to prominence within the church, fought for the rights of women throughout the country, yet dealt with personal trials and her share of heartbreak.
Okay, that's pretty good. Let's go to our last article here.
Yeah.
And this one is a doozy.
It is.
This is from this is Elder Bednar, National Press Club speech, and we got this directly off of. We like to go to the newsroom.churchofjesuschrist.org just as much as possible because that's a very good source for information about what's happening. So this just happened here just a couple of days ago here in my neck of the woods, the Washington D.C. area. So Elder Bednar is speaking to the National Press Club. Sorry, my computer's loading here. And he is the first member of the church to do so since 2000, back when President Hinckley spoke before.
Oh.
You know, why do you think it's been so long since a senior leader of the church spoke?
Are they done by invitation? And if that's the case, what did Gordon B. Hinckley say?
He gave a very pedestrian address.
Okay.
Elder Bednar, I think, is really going to give us a lot of useful information here. Now, think about the last times that senior members of the church have done real media coverage, not interviews with the Deseret News.
Yeah.
You have you have Elder Bednar at this news lunch at the press club. You have Dallin Oaks at the University of Virginia in 2021. You have Elder Holland with the BBC interview in 2012. And then you have the Washington Post interviewing Bishop Kaze after the Ensign Peak leak. We're talking about 4. Those are the only 4 I can think of. Listeners, if you have more, then let me know. But in the last 10 years, there's only been 4 senior leaders of the church who have done a real interview. Larry King, I'm sorry, that's not a real interview. And besides, that's more than 10 years old. Has done a real interview. So this stuff just does not happen. Why do you think it's so rare for these senior members of the church to give these big time interviews and discussions?
Is it a lack of confidence? I don't know. I think that for a church that really wants to put itself out there and be on the front page and be the front lines and kind of the front runner of everything, they really are very reserved and held back. So
they sure are.
Yeah, very conservative.
I mean, President Nelson has not done one major news interview since he became the president of the church. Not one.
No, everything has been everything's been very guarded. Like only we'll do a press release to our own newsroom,
Yep, but no Q&As. No Q&As with any media that could ask you a tough question. Now, sometimes they do questions and answers, but those questions are pre-sanitized. They're not going to be off the cuff. They're going to be filtered in advance.
That's right.
So, talking about this, Al, and I know people in Reddit put out these questionnaires and they say, what's your favorite apostle? And then you see the rankings, and usually Uchtdorf comes out on the top and Oaks is near the bottom, and Bednar, he's usually at the bottom too. But honestly, after this talk, I have to tell you, Al, I think he is my favorite apostle. And I think it's because, Al, unfortunately, I'm an academic. And so is David Bednar. Like goes to like.
True.
That's the thing. He speaks my language. He speaks my language. So you got to have, if somebody's going to be a favorite, he's going to be my favorite. And by the way, he's going to be president of the church someday.
Yeah.
Because he was ordained an apostle when 52 years old, and he's in pretty darn good shape all the time.
Yeah. And he came straight out of BYU, Idaho. He was the president of BYU, Idaho, right before he became ordained the youngest apostle of this generation anyway. So...
He's only 69 years old, and I think he's 6th in line.
Yeah.
And there's already ahead of him 3 guys who are 90 years old, Elder Oaks, Elder Nelson, Elder Bednar, Elder Ballard. They're all in their 90s. So that's going to put him 3rd. When he's going to be 70 years old, he's going to be 3rd in line. He's going to make it out. He's going to be the president of the church.
Yeah, he will. I mean, as long as there is a quorum of 12 apostles to draw the presidency from, he will make it.
Yep, because it's just a big longevity. It's outlive him contest, and he's well on his way. So in this address, he spent 1/3 of the address on church teachings and doctrine.
Okay.
1/3 on the humanitarian mission of the church, and 1/3 on question and answer, which I thought was a pretty nice layout.
Yeah.
And honestly, only the smartest apostles, Al, do Q&As.
Yeah.
You know what? Only the smartest ones do. Elder Oaks did Q&A. Elder Bednar did Q&A. Elder Ballard, the used car salesman, he doesn't do Q&A.
No, I'm pretty sure that Jeffrey Holland would do a Q&A. But keep in mind, these are all the academics. These guys were all presidents of a BYU, a Brigham Young University, whether it was Idaho or Provo.
Now, Elder Holland did the famous BBC interview in 2012, which, quite frankly, did not go that well.
No.
And
I
would
love to see him do a Q&A.
Well, just watch that BBC 2012 interview, and you're going to realize why he doesn't do them anymore.
He's no dodo.
It wasn't very good. He's read a few books. He went to a pretty good school.
That's right.
Okay, so speaking of, before we're going to play some clips, and I'm going to get your reaction to this in a minute, but let me just set some more groundwork. Now, he spoke a lot about the humanitarian mission, and he gave each of the members in attendance that 48-page at Church's annual humanitarian report, which just came out last week. And we covered that in depth in our last episode, Al.
Yes, we did.
Didn't we?
Yes, we did. And
I'm sure that they enjoyed what was inside. What was inside that 48-page pamphlet, Al?
Oh my goodness! What wasn't inside that 48-page pamphlet?
Full of colored pictures.
All
those pictures.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. this pamphlet, it laid it out.
Yeah, lots of pictures. It looked like it was written for somebody with a 5th grade education. So I thought that was amusing. We covered that in depth in our last episode. Go back and listen to it. Now, what's interesting is, Elder Bednar, these Q&As, you could submit them in advance through an email to the National Press Club, and it doesn't look like the church screened these, which is very rare. And also, Elder Bednar, he did no big gaffes in this, and he took the tough questions rapid fire with the reporter right next to him. And he did what I believe an apostle is really supposed to do. He preached the gospel. He gave his message. He handled the tough questions. And I thought he did what he was supposed to do. And I thought overall he did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
What's interesting also is, go ahead.
I was just going to say he did as good a job of representing the church's finances as that pamphlet. It was very sweet and very sugar-coated.
Sure. Very positive.
Very positive.
Very positive narrative is what he delivered, and he also, there was no real historical or scientific claims whatsoever. That's in a big contrast to Elder Nelson. Remember, in the Worldwide Devotional for young adults 2 weeks ago, was full of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Elder Bednar, not one scientific claim.
Nope.
Elder Bednar is a smart cookie. He's got a PhD from Purdue. He's no dodo.
No, he knows what can be tested and what can't.
Yeah, he's a smart guy. Now, I want to talk about, here's the first clip. And the first clip, I've got about 6 or 7 clips here, so let's try to get through them fast. And I've got these turned up to 1.4 speed, so they won't take quite as long.
Okay.
But he is going to talk about the church's humanitarian efforts and projects, and he's going to bring up that $906 million figure that we talked about last week. Well, let me play this for you.
20 years ago, President Hinckley mentioned that the church completed 829 humanitarian projects in 101 countries. Last year, that number was 3,909 projects in 188 countries. And this was just one portion of a comprehensive $906 million effort to care for those in need.
Now, did that come through okay?
That one came much clearer than President Nelson. Yeah.
That's good. So he said that the church gave $906 million to help those in need this year.
Yeah.
Is that a true statement?
Technically. Well, I guess it depends on, yes, if you count all of the church's members donated to the church in order to make that donation.
Yeah, and we covered this in depth in our last episode. But that $906 million figure, that includes members giving to other members, that is filtered through the church.
Yeah,
that's not the church reaching into its own resources and coming up with 906. That's me giving to a pool, which is a pool of money, which is immediately given to another member who is in need. So it's not really the church giving it; it's more me giving it through the church.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Technicality.
Yeah, they're using that 906 million. Yeah, it's a technicality, but for those who are not in the know, they wouldn't understand that. What the church actually gave this last year was $56 million of church-given donations, not $906 million. We covered that in our last episode. Now, our next one is we get to hear finally somebody asks about the stock market, and Elder Bednar is asked about Ensign Peak. Because everybody knows that the church's investment arm, Ensign Peak, has around $100 billion in it. Now, the church has admitted that there's $50 billion in it, but the whistleblower says that there's $100, and the Widow's Mite organization thinks it's around $105.
Yeah.
But it is probably in that neighborhood of $100 to $105. So he gets asked about that, and his answer is very revealing. Let me play this for you.
Okay.
With over $100 billion in funding assets, the LDS Church has more capability than any other church in the country to help eliminate poverty. What more could the church do in terms of humanitarian efforts here?
Okay. I hope I addressed some of that in what I just said. You wanted to move quick. And number two, if you take a look at the stock market, I don't think it's $100 million anymore.
Okay, so the Deseret News corrected him. He says, if you take a look at the stock market, I don't think it's 100 million. The Deseret News put that billion back in there. He meant to say 100 billion.
Yeah.
And even the Deseret News corrects that.
Yeah.
So he didn't say, what are you talking about? 100 billion? Where are you getting that? Yeah, he didn't say that.
He's saying it's probably not 100 billion anymore because the stock market is tanked. So.
So if it was worth, according to the Widow's Mite, 105 billion, and the stock market is quite down for the last little bit. I looked at my 401k; it's doing horribly, but the stock market is down.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, it might have crossed below 100 billion, but he didn't say, "What are you talking about? 100 billion? There's only 50 in there." This is a tacit admission that the number is somewhere in the ballpark.
Yes, which is, let's not forget, double what the pamphlet said.
Now, that the humanitarian pamphlet did not talk about enzyme peak, because that's not human. The church doesn't. Yeah, the church doesn't use enzyme peak for any of its humanitarian. Nothing comes from enzyme peak. The enzyme peak is a war chest. There's only been 3 withdrawals from enzyme peak since it was founded back in the 90s.
Yeah.
The 3 are to bail out the church's Deseret Mutual Insurance Company, to pay for the City Creek Mall, and then for the churches to settle the Boy Scout sex abuse scandal, because the church had a lot of people who were suing it, and I think they gave up. I wanted to say it's around $500 million.
Yeah.
So there's only been 3 disbursements, nothing for humanitarian.
And I do want to point out, just on the note of the Boy Scout scandal, that the church really has owned up to its responsibility and not tried to dodge out of it. So I am impressed with that.
I am too. I mean, they just coughed it up. They didn't litigate it out. They just said, "Fine, we're going to dip into enzyme peak. We're going to pay all these folks," and the payouts have already begun.
Yeah.
You're not seeing a lot of people who are coming forward from the Boy Scouts and saying, "Hey, I was wronged and I haven't gotten my money." There's a reason. It's because it's all been settled from. There was several class action lawsuits.
Yeah.
Several of these big law firms got tens of thousands of people together, and they did huge class action against the Boy Scouts of America, which is one reason that it filed for bankruptcy. But the church came and backstopped it and said, "We are going to take care of this." So that's better than nothing, but it would have been nice if there had been no abuse to begin with, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, now I've got a question, Al. So you got $100 billion.
Yeah.
Why doesn't the church do more humanitarian with that money? The humanitarian report, like we talked about last week, was 48 pages. None of that comes from Ensign Peak. None of it comes from there. So why doesn't the church do more out of Ensign Peak and do more humanitarian? This has been a question that people have asked for a really long time, including Christina last week.
True. Yeah, that 900 million figure, like we said, that's from the church membership themselves donating in offerings and fast offerings to the church, and then the church is distributing it in the name of the church. And so, I mean, on the one hand, I'm sure that the members don't disparage the church for taking claim to that, because most people who donate to the church are proud to be affiliated with the church. On the other hand, it is the membership that's making that donation. It's not the church as an organization.
Yes, it's member to member pass through.
Yeah.
It's not the church.
Well,
it's really a member-to-member thing.
And keep in mind, DVs, this is a church that talks very much about tithing, 10%, and, making sure that you're giving offerings aside from tithing. So, I mean, if the church is going to use or if the church is going to pay tithing, I would expect the church to give 10% of its 100 billion plus, or whatever it's at, to charitable services or charitable donations, and you don't see that.
That seems pretty reasonable. That would seem to be pretty reasonable. In fact, when you look at these wealthy folks, the Bill and Melinda Gateses, the Zuckerbergs, and some of these other people, they're often donating about 10% of their net worth every single year.
I think that Bill Gates has given 50% in the past of his all his wealth to charity. Yeah. They've done it a couple times.
So you were asking. Yeah, he has. That's why his net worth is half of what it was. But every year he gives about 10% of it away. But I think I've found the answer to why the church doesn't do more with humanitarian. People have been asking this a long time, especially since Ensign Peak is out. And the humanitarian report says that nothing came out of Ensign Peak. And it's from Dallin H. Oakes' the book. It's called The Lord's Way. And he published this in, I want to say 2000. But I found a passage in here which I think is going to answer the question, why doesn't the church spend more on humanitarian? So let me read this to you and let me get your reaction. Quote, "The preeminence of the spiritual over the temporal, which Jesus taught, has many applications in our own day. For example, It explains why our church spends great sums preaching the restored gospel and building temples to perform the ordinances of eternity, rather than, as some advocate, devoting these same resources to temporal concerns already being pursued by others, such as preserving the environment, researching cures for diseases, or administering to other physical needs that can be accomplished without priesthood power or direction, end quote. What is President Oaks trying to tell us here, Alan?
Let's see. I think we talked about a quote that the church, what he's saying is that the church is not responsible for the temporal well-being of people, but for the spiritual well-being. So the church focuses its efforts on doing what the temporal can't. Is that right?
Right. So that's pretty much it. Anyone can help with the temporal concerns of the earth, whether you are a believer or not, whether you're in the church or not, whether you have the priesthood power or not. Anyone can help with vaccines. Anyone can give someone a loaf of bread. Anyone can give someone a fish to eat.
Sure.
But only the church has the priesthood power to build temples and preach the gospel. That's why the church focuses all of their resources on all of these temples, 400 temples at around 60 million a piece. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And preaching the gospel. Yeah. Those are the only things that the church can do with priesthood power. Anyone can do a vaccine. Anyone can build a hospital. Anyone can build an orphanage. So Dallin Oaks is telling us in this quote that those are already being pursued by others.
I guess. I believe that, that's exactly what Dallin H. Oaks is saying. I just don't agree with him.
Okay. Yeah. That just, the church could do it all.
Well,
I mean, the church has enough to do everything.
Exactly. I mean, I have to pay my water bill and my electric bill. I don't have to pay one or the other. So,
I mean, there's 4 missions. There used to be 3 missions of the church back in the day. Now there's the 4th mission.
Yeah.
But what about that 4th mission, which is to take care of the needy? Church is saying that other people can do that instead of them.
Yeah,
which
that's for the temporal.
That's for the Gentiles.
Yeah, exactly.
Let the Gentiles take care of the poor and the needy. So, and what's amusing, or not amusing, but what is interesting is Elder Bednar addresses that as well. He talks about tithing and whether the church needs your money. So let me play this clip for you. And he's talking about how people can get out of poverty and whether the church needs your money or not. Let me play this clip for you.
The pathway out of poverty is keeping the commandments of God, including tithing. The church doesn't need their money, but those people need the blessings that come from obeying God's commandments.
So the church doesn't need your money.
This is a really juicy episode, D-Base.
Yeah. The church doesn't need your money.
Yeah, obviously. So
and he's 100% right. The church does not need anyone's money at this point.
Yeah.
Church has an operating budget of around $8 billion a year. Ensign Peak brings in $10 billion, and the church real estate and other commercial investments bring in about $15 billion. The church brings in $25 billion a year without tithing. Without tithing, brings in 25, and only has an operating budget of around 7 or 8. So yeah, I mean, the church doesn't need anyone's tithing at all, ever, going forward, in the future, ever.
Yeah, but
he's right.
Yeah, and yet they still teach that tithing is essential. I find it a little funny that he's going to say, essentially, what I take from that is you can spend your way out of poverty by being obedient to the law of tithing.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
Think about the church is going gangbusters in Africa. Think about those African saints who are making on average $2 a day. They don't have running water. They don't have power. They barely have enough money to eat.
Yep.
He's saying that the pathway out of poverty is for those people to pay the tiny bits that they have to a church whose net worth. Yes, whose net worth. Remember, Widows Might Report. We covered this in a previous episode. Yeah. The church's overall net worth, including every asset, is $250 billion. And the pathway for those saints out of poverty is not for the church to invest in them, but for them to pay that 20 cents a day to the church.
Yeah.
When Elder Bednar admits that the church does not need their money.
This almost sounds like a really brilliant scam. Like, the church doesn't need you to pay your tithing. You need to pay your tithing to the church, though. Don't pay your tithing for the church. You pay your tithing for you. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just basically like a test. It's kind of like the word of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Coffee, many studies have shown that coffee has no ill effects on people whatsoever. I mean, coffee, and same with tea. In fact, some studies have shown that drinking 1 cup of wine every day actually improves health. So, I mean, the word of wisdom and tithing, those aren't really about, they're about obedience. Obedience is the first law of heaven. And you shouldn't ask why. You should just, there's an old saying in the military, it's not ours to ask why, but to do or die.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the church's approach.
From the Charge of the Light Brigade, I believe. So, I mean, when it comes to the whole coffee thing, I have pretty severe asthma. I drink 2 cups of coffee in the morning to open up my lungs so I can breathe. But the church says, as a matter of obedience, it would be better for me to suffer and not be able to breathe than to drink 2 cups of coffee. And it's not about the caffeine. Right. It's not about whatever. Okay. It's about the obedience.
Yeah, it's correct. It's about obedience. And that's what tithing is. It's not about funding the church, because the church does, as he admits, doesn't need your money. Okay. So our next clip here is they ask him about church growth. And I thought this was very interesting because, as we've discussed in previous podcasts, the growth in the United States is incredibly flat, less than 0.5% per year. That used to be one of the church's strongholds. He's going to be asked about that. And let's hear his reaction to what is happening with church growth.
Okay.
This one.
I want to talk a little bit about how your membership is changing. The Latter-day Saint Church has said it's one of the fastest growing religions in America. But according to the latest reporting by the Salt Lake Tribune, the church outside Utah has only added 8,000 new members, it's reporting, in the U.S. during the past 2 years. And it says Utah's growth of about 34,000 members represents the majority of the church's 42,000 member growth in America over the past 2 years. And for those of us who follow Pew and Gallup survey data, it's been clear that the church's replacement rate in the U.S. has been negative for over a decade. Back in 2008, Pew ran a survey that said the replacement rate of the church has dropped to 80%, and that means that for every 5 members who leave the church behind, 4 new converts join the church. Can you talk about some of those findings and how you can say that the church in America is growing when we're looking at statistics like this?
I'd be happy to, and I'll try to be an apostle and not an academic and a statistician, which is what I used to do. I would just highlight one feature and talk about the very complicated nature of what we're discussing. If you take a look at the church in the aggregate, it is growing, which in the climate that we find today is rather newsworthy in and of itself. Secondly, if you take, for example, the western area of the United States, we have had a huge outmigration of members from that part of the country. We've also had a huge migration from Mexico and Central America. I have no idea what the real numbers are.
And that's basically his summary. So she brings up the point that in the last 2 years, the church outside of Utah has only grown by just a couple thousand.
Yeah.
And remember, this is during the pandemic. During the pandemic, all those foreign missionaries, they were redirected into the United States. There was a huge number of missionaries inside the U.S. And she's pointed out that outside of the state of Utah for the last 2 years, the church growth has been nothing, basically nothing in the United States, and that the church has not had a replacement rate. For every 5 people who join the church, 4 people who join the church, 5 people leave.
Yeah.
And what is his answer? I have no idea.
Wow. His answer is essentially, don't talk to me about that. With all the people moving around the western United States, I do know that the state of Utah has seen a huge influx of people that have moved into it, and I'm assuming that this is a lot of people that would rather live amongst like-minded people to themselves. But even so, there's still that rate of wow. I mean, when we're talking about like just a few thousand people outside of Utah are being baptized into the church in a year. Oh, that's kind of depressing.
Well, imagine being those missionaries in this climate during COVID.
Yeah.
Who are that? Somebody ran their numbers in Reddit and says that the average missionary during the past 2 years in the United States is baptizing 0.4 persons per year. So a missionary in his whole mission is averaging less than one baptism for an entire mission. This is in the United States, where there's lots of members who are supposed to be helping these missionaries find people to baptize. Imagine the depression that those missionaries are going through, beating their heads against the wall.
Yeah, for sure.
This just must be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, pretty tough. His answer is, I have no idea. So she also asks him about trans members, and I thought that this was a very interesting response. So let's hear what he has to say about trans members of the church.
How would a trans person be treated if they had already completed their transition before exploring membership in the church?
We welcome all and strive to love them. Now, I use the word strive because we don't do that perfectly. And so people have stereotypes, they have misconceptions, they have biases, and they have prejudices. We strive to love everybody.
So they strive to love everybody.
I know it's hard to love everybody.
Well,
they're doing their best.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I guess so. What would happen, though, Al, to a trans member who joined the church? What would immediately happen to them upon being confirmed?
Okay, so it's definitely against the church doctrine and the church teachings. And if a person's going to be transgender and get like a gender reassigning surgery, they will they'll be disfellowshipped. So I would assume that, okay, you give this person all the way through the discussions, you get them through baptism, you confirm them, and then immediately escort them into the bishop's office for a court of love, where they will be they will have their what do they call it now, D-Base?
Membership restrictions.
That's right. You're going to get your membership restricted right after baptism.
It's immediately. Right after confirmation, they will say, having been commissioned to Jesus Christ, receive the gift of the Holy Ghost. They give you a blessing. You'll shake hands to everyone in the circle. As you said, you'll go immediately into the bishop's office, and you will be disfellowshipped or have your membership restricted.
Yep, all before your multicolored hair is even dry. Yeah.
Right. I don't. I wonder, though, Al, there's got to be some people out there who were trans who didn't tell. Now, being trans, you're in your interview questions for baptisms, being trans or committing an abortion or committing a murder, those are things that could disqualify you from joining the church. But there's some people, I'm sure, that have lied their way through it. And there may be some trans members of the church who might even be stake presidents now.
Yeah.
There could be a trans stake president who was. Now, it would almost be impossible for someone to transition while being a member and then become a stake president. Almost impossible. But if you never told anyone, you could make it, very high up into the church. There could be a sleeper area authority out there who's trans. It's theoretically possible.
It certainly is, because, it hasn't been so front page news or mainstream a topic for very long. However, a lot of people have been transitioning between the gender that they were assigned at birth through biology and the gender that they identify with. So, it goes both ways. It's not, you could have a Relief Society president, maybe that's just part of their, the story that they give is, well, I'm infertile, that's why I don't have any children. There are plenty of sterile men out there, so you could certainly have a stake president or an area authority that says, well, I'm just infertile. I'm, shooting blanks here. So, and there's no way to check. What are you going to do? Out yourself?
Right. Almost assuredly, there is a trans person in the church who has a high leadership position, but is not open about it.
Absolutely.
Almost assuredly.
Yeah. And
I want to also,
we've seen people that have come out in the past that said, by the way, I was not born this gender. I had myself reassigned to this gender through a very expensive surgery. 10 years ago or whatever. And then the church finds out about it and they're like, oh, for shame. They're quite shocked. And I guess those are the people that the church is really striving to imperfectly love the best they can.
Well, I also want to think about one other thing. What about a trans person who is, they join the church and they have the membership restrictions, but they believe in the gospel and they love the Lord and they want to go to the temple, but they can't because they're trans. They have membership restrictions. What if they're poor, Al? What if they're really, really poor? And these gender confirmation surgeries, they can be up to $50,000.
Yeah.
You're going to have to tell that trans member of the church, sorry, you can't go to the temple until you have gender confirmation surgery. Sorry, and I don't have the money for it. Sorry, you don't have enough money to go to heaven.
And this is from a church that has $100 billion. But hey, I guess it's not the church's responsibility to pay for their repentance. But isn't it the church's responsibility to help people through the repentance process? I'm thinking aloud here, Dives. So this is a really interesting conundrum to run into, and the church painted itself into this corner. I'm just trying to think it logically through. It's a pickle. Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, and he, of course, doesn't address any of those issues. But this is a rapid-fire Q&A, so I assume that we can't get into all these minutiae.
Yeah. I am comforted in knowing that he is striving his best to love them.
I think that we could do an even better job. That's all I'm saying. Seems like we could do more. Now, this isn't the only controversy because she asks about the role of women in the church. Could there eventually be a woman prophet in the church? Well, let's hear Elder Bednar's response.
You mentioned that women lead within the church in many ways. Will there ever be a female president of the Church of Latter-day Saints? Can a woman be a prophet in the lineage of Joseph Smith?
It's a great question. We follow the pattern of the ancient church. We believe that a man must be called of God by prophecy and by the laying on of hands, by those who are in authority to preach the gospel and administer the ordinances of the pattern anciently, apostles were men. That's the pattern.
So the pattern is that only men are apostles. So in other words, there's never going to be a woman prophet. He doesn't even open the door a crack. He doesn't say, oh, we could have a revelation. Oh, we're the Lord's mouthpieces. This could change. He doesn't even crack the door just the tiniest bit.
No, that was as definite as he's been. He made that clear. He rattled off that article of faith without any hesitation.
Yep. There's no crack open. And, what I look for in a religion is that a religion can, I guess I'm just arrogant because I kind of want to know why. Religion is supposed to be able to answer the why questions. Why are we here? What's our purpose? Science is supposed to answer the hows. But it seems like the church, why can't we answer? Why can't women have the priesthood? Why did blacks not have the priesthood? Why? I don't know. There's so many why questions that why was polygamy needed? Why was it stopped? Why were little children not being in the 2015 policy of exclusion? Why were they not allowed to, be part of the church? Why? There's so many why questions. And we just get, that's what's in the Bible. I would get that from a regular church that doesn't believe in continuing revelation. They're doing the best they can. We got this 2,000-year-old book. That's all we got. I get it. Okay, that makes sense to me. And where's the why?
One from a church that doesn't proclaim itself openly to be the church that has all the answers, that claims to be the one and only true church. I mean, there's tons of denominations out there that they don't claim to be the one and only true denomination. They believe that God's talking to people through several different denominations on their level. So this is a really interesting conundrum, especially. I grew up in an era during the church's big promotional videos, like Together Forever and What is Real and Our Heavenly Father's Plans. These were church videos produced by the church that ask those questions. The church has the answers to who am I? Why am I here? Where did I come from before I was born? Where am I going afterward? And what is the purpose of life? And all the why, right? And we come to find out that the answer to the question why that the church claims to have is we don't know. That's not,
and unfortunately,
not satisfactory.
Yeah. Why can't gays marry in the temple? Why can't trans people participate fully? Why can't blacks have the priesthood? Why can't women hold a priesthood responsibility? Why can't they have the priesthood? Why can't they have responsibility? Why? We don't have the answers to any of these, and none of these answers have been forthcoming. And that's what I look for in a religion. I want a religion to tell me what the whys are.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm not getting it.
Well, especially a church that's advertised so openly that, hey, we have the whys. Okay, so you ask why, and their answer is, well, we don't know. Yeah,
I guess that's a little frustrating.
It is.
But along the same lines, he talks about whether gays can eventually marry in the temple too. So let's hear what he says. He shut the door firmly on women in the priesthood. Let's see if he can open the door for gays getting married.
Let's hear it.
Ever envision LGBTQ church members being able to marry and be sealed within the church?
We believe that marriage between a man and a woman is ordained of God, and that the family is central to the Father's plan for the eternal destiny and happiness of his children.
You mentioned
so that's it. Yeah. She asked, can gays eventually get sealed in the temple? And his answer was to quote the Proclamation of the Family.
Yeah, and that doesn't give a very thorough answer. Okay, so a man and a woman marriage is ordained between a man and a woman. Okay, well, what about a transgender man, transgender woman? So they've swapped genders, and you still have a man and a woman. Is that okay? I want the answer to that one. I want the answer to that one as much as I want the answer to, okay, if decaffeinated coffee is not against the word of wisdom, so you get a hot cup of decaf and then you pour some Dr. Pepper into it that's caffeinated, then does it become against the word of wisdom? Well, if you throw some ice in there, maybe it's the hot drink. Yeah. These are the questions I want the answers to.
Yeah, I guess you and I have different questions we want answers to now.
I'm a mess.
Here's the last clip here. We're going a little bit long. Here's the last clip from Elder Bednar. And he talks about the name of the church. And President Nelson, of course, everybody wants to know, why aren't you using the term Mormon anymore? Which seems like a pretty reasonable question.
Sure.
Let's hear his response.
I've noticed that you're not using some words anymore. Mormon seems to not be mentioned as often. LDS, the acronym, I accidentally, I think, used it several times when asking you questions. But can you talk about the decision to really emphasize Church of Latter-day Saints as opposed to calling yourself Mormon or LDS Church?
I think that President Russell M. Nelson will be known forever as a man of remarkable courage to say we will no longer use a nickname pejoratively attached to our church by our enemies anymore. And we're inviting other people to call us what we are called, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay, your reaction now?
Really? Pejorative? He's going to say that the term Mormon is pejorative. Okay, so the whole thing originates from the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith himself said that the term Mormon means more good. So this is something that the church for 150 years used very proudly. In fact, I mean, we talked most recently about, this was a couple years only after the I Am a Mormon campaign. I'm saying this is 50 years after the Homefront commercials were out there that said, from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. The church has been identifying itself as the Mormon church for eons. But now he's going to say, this was a pejorative term that was made up by the church's enemies to slander the church. No, you're wrong. Sorry, Mr. Bednar. You're wrong. I can't agree. Can't give you that.
Well, okay. As a member of the armed forces who's going to be retiring somewhat soon, I can tell you that I have known people of great courage, great fortitude, who have literally put their lives on the line for our country to defend this Constitution, have put themselves in harm's way, have spent lots of time away from home in places that most people don't want to go ever in their lives. And so when he says that it takes a lot of courage to eliminate the name Mormon from the vernacular, that the word courage, it doesn't really strike me as something that's very courageous. Maybe I'm just cynical.
I think Nephi was more courageous when he said, I will go and do the things the Lord had commanded. Rather than saying, Well, this has been my pet peeve that God doesn't want. Okay, I'm going to circle back for just a moment here to this excellent clip towards the end of episode 6 of Under the Banner of Heaven, where Alan Lafferty's sitting in there and saying, it seems to me that when you look at most revelations throughout history, it's just men taking their personal opinions and attaching God to it and saying, this is revelation. And then saying, yeah, this is what it is. So you have Elder Nelson, who this has been his pet peeve, is the church being called the Mormon Church, or the term Mormon being used instead of Latter-day Saint, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He's using that pet peeve and then calling it God. Like, this is God's pet peeve because it's my pet peeve. I don't buy it.
I just don't find it to be a very... There's a lot of courage that could be utilized. We just had a horrific shooting in Texas.
Yeah.
A courageous thing to do. That was an opportunity to show true colors. That was an opportunity to find courage. That was an opportunity for President Nelson to galvanize the members of the church and say, you know what? This is the bill that we need to be supporting. Write your congressmen, write your senators. Let's mobilize. Let's stop this horrible massacres from taking place. That takes courage. Put your neck on the line. Become unpopular. That's a courageous thing to do. Changing the name Mormon out of the church just doesn't strike me as very courageous.
No, at all. I mean, this is a far stretch from a Border Patrol agent storming into a school building where there's an active shooter, even when backup hasn't arrived yet. That's courage to me. It may be stupid courage, but dang, it's courage. I mean, he went in there in the face of danger. Where's the danger in calling somebody Mormon or referring to it as the Mormon Church?
Right. Honestly, I just want to say one more thing on this, and that's that people really misinterpret what President Nelson said about that. He didn't say chop out the word Mormon altogether. What he said is don't call it the Mormon Church. But even in church leadership, even in the manuals now, they're eliminating the word Mormon. He didn't say get rid of the word Mormon. He said call the name of the church by its full name, not the Mormon Church. He didn't say that the word Mormon in itself was inherently bad or inherently evil, which is a good thing because this podcast is called the Mormon News Roundup.
He didn't even say it was a pejorative term at the time. He just said, use that when you take the name of Jesus Christ out of the church, that's the major victory for Satan.
Right. And people have taken it way too far. They seem to think that if I even use the word Mormon, that's a victory for Satan. That's not what he meant. And even in the church manuals, that's what they think that they meant. That's why they renamed the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and got rid of Mormon Helping Hands. Honestly, they're all misinterpreting his comment, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, true to form, the Latter-day Zeitgeist out there has taken his words and blown it completely out of proportion. By saying that, well, the word Mormon is just as offensive as the N-word. No, not by a long shot.
No. Well, to our listeners out there, if you made it this far, drop us a like, drop us a comment. We really appreciate you listening and helping us ruminate on the Great and Spacious Beehive.
Yep.
And I want to thank my co-host, Al, as well.
Well, like we said, this is a juicy episode.
Sure was. I wish I didn't get a chance to go over all of the Elder Bednar comments because he had a lot of other good ones.
Sure did.
But we will link to it in the show notes. And if you only watch some of it, just watch the last 20 minutes with the Q&A. Really good stuff. Thanks a lot, Al.
Yep. And thank you, D-Vase. We look forward to seeing you guys next week where we talk more about the Mormon news. And we'll play you out with some more. Thank you again to Weird Alma for letting us use his music. We're going to see here it goes again. President Nelson telling us that it's a major victory for Satan.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a being with no moral constraints. My number one goal is to hurt the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.